I'm Chris Bloor from Agriculture Victoria Meat and Wool Services, and I want to thank you all for joining this morning. Thank you for coming along to this grants opportunities for beef and sheep producers, part of our webinar series. This morning we have Peter Harrison and Emily Witham from our agriculture policy team. They deliver and do the admin for the grant process, and they're very happy to help you get your grants up and through the process. Also from Northmore and Gordon, we have Mark, Barber and Remi Cesaro. Is that right? Remi can correct his name when I got it wrong. That's okay. They are one of the energy auditors. So if you do undertake this process, they may be the people that come out to your farm or over the phone, depending on whether Remi can get back from Singapore, to do an energy audit and help you through the process of what your application might look like. They're just one of the companies available. And I'm not sure if Peter has managed to join us yet this morning, but Peter August is a producer who was successful in a round one grants, and he will just go through his process and how he found the process for you as a producer and what opportunities there might be for you. So with that very simple introduction, I'd like to hand over to Peter Harrison to go through the agriculture and energy investment plan and the opportunities for beef and sheep producers. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Chris. I might just actually defer to Emily.
Yeah, great. So I'll just provide you with a really quick overview of, I guess, the history of the program and where it's at now and what's available. So this program was originally launched in 2018 off the back of a survey with the Victorian Farmers Federation in 2017, just to get a better understanding about what some of the key issues were for farm businesses around, I guess, reducing energy costs and adaptation of on-farm energy opportunities. So the program was really successful and ended up being oversubscribed, and it closed in applications for on-farm energy assessments closed in March of 2020, and the applications for grants closed in June. So we were fortunate enough to receive an additional $30 million in last year's budget, and we were able to reopen the program in March. And we've made a couple of tweaks to this program based on the learnings from previous years. So this year, or when we've launched the program, it includes the main focus of the program is still on-farm energy efficiency, but this time we've also included things such as productivity improvements, looking at energy and water efficiency gains, and also taking into consideration things such as productivity and emission and waste reduction. So we launched the program in March. Applications for on-farm energy assessments close on the 15th of July. And then applications for grants at this point in time are closing on the 15th of December or whenever funds are fully expended. So it may close a little earlier. The key components of the program is it's structured into on-farm energy assessments and grants. So having an on-farm energy assessment is a requirement to be able to receive a grant under the program. So there's two types of on-farm energy assessments that you apply for, and these are free. So there's a type 1 on-farm energy assessment, which is for businesses that have energy bills between 8,000 and 25,000, and type 2 on-farm energy assessments are for farm businesses with energy bills over 25,000. The energy bills is comprised of your electricity, your gas, and your on-farm diesel that isn't related to just driving a vehicle around the farm. So if it's related to harvest or anything like that, it's considered eligible. But if you're driving your ute across the farm or between properties or just moving hay bales, then that wouldn't be considered an eligible energy expenditure. So what happens in this process is that you're able to apply for an on-farm energy assessment, the department review it, and then you are issued with a voucher and an assessor is allocated to you. And an example of that would be Mark and Remi in Northmore Gordon. They might be allocated to you. They would then give you a call and they set up a time to have an on-farm energy, to commence the on-farm energy assessment. And I'll let Mark go through some more of that a little bit later. Once you've received your on-farm energy assessment, you'll often find a list of no and low cost measures on your farm that you might implement that will have some level of energy savings for you. And then you might also see larger items that have been identified on your on-farm energy assessment that are eligible for you to apply for a grant. When you get to the point of applying for a grant, there's 3 levels of grants that you're able to apply for. The first is a fast track rebate. In order to be eligible for a fast track rebate, you must have had an on-farm energy assessment done under the Agriculture Energy Investment Plan, either in the previous year or under this sort of year's program. They are for grants of up to $20,000. All of our grants require a co-cash contribution, meaning that if you would like $20,000 from us for a grant, your business at a minimum has to also be putting in $20,000. So the fast track rebates, if you speak to the department or send us an email, or once you've received your completed on-farm energy assessment, we'll send you a link to that. That allows you to make purchases that are exactly aligned to your on-farm energy assessment. So for example, if you're recommended 10 kilowatts of solar in your on-farm energy assessment, and you then go and purchase 10 kilowatts of solar, then you can seek a rebate for that, and we'll reimburse you for those purchases that have been made. We then go into our grants that require you to have an application. You can't have commenced a project or made any purchases until your grant has been approved. So for the grants, there's a tier 1 grant, which is grants up to $50,000. And then there's a tier 2 grant, which are grants from $50,000 to $250,000. Now for a type 1 grant, you can have received for a tier 1 grant or a fast track rebate, you can receive a type 1 or a type 2 on-farm energy assessment. If you're looking to apply for a tier 2 grant, you must have received a type 2 on-farm energy assessment. So that's a quick overview of, I guess, what's available under the program. If you had received an on-farm energy assessment under the previous program, you're still eligible to apply for a grant under this program. If you had received a grant under the last program, but not to the full value of what you're eligible for. So for example, if you had received a type 2 on-farm energy assessment and you received a grant of $100,000 under the last program, you're eligible to apply for additional $150,000 under this program. So I think that's probably the main things to go through. You need to apply through the Agriculture Victoria website. Once you click onto the relevant link, you'll then be transferred through to the Business Victoria website. Just need to make sure you've got your ABN, and when you're applying for an on-farm energy assessment, to make sure you've got your energy bills that can be uploaded and that you've also got all of your meter numbers available. Peter, I might pause there and see if there's anything you would like to add before we flick across to Mark and Remi.
Thanks, Ed. Morning, everyone. My name's Peter Harrison. I actually process most of the grant applications that come through. I do the assessments primarily for the Tier 2 grants. The number one thing is I'm also the liaison point for farmers within the program. So just a couple of things I'll add. The eligibility criteria under the program is that basically you're a farmer that operates a property in Victoria. Now, if you're a farmer that lives in South Australia or New South Wales and the property is in Victoria, we base it on where the property is located, not on where your registered business address is or where you may reside. So we do the assessments and the grants based on the property and the location and the needs of the property. So that's the basic eligibility criteria. It's for farmers who have energy costs of $8,000 or more, and that covers diesel, electricity and gas. So the majority of the broadacre farmers, graziers, have come in at Tier 2 level, which is $25,000 or more, mainly because of their diesel use. But that it's unique to each farm as to where you'll actually fit, but you don't need to get too stressed about that because we work that out for you. So the process, as Em's alluded to, it's an online process. We don't accept applications in paper format. So basically you have to go into the website, go into the link and complete the application online. The thing that we probably need to be mindful of, this is not a 24-hour turnaround program. It will take probably 4 to 6 weeks to process the application and for the energy assessor to make contact with you. And then it could take another 4 weeks to 6 weeks after that, depending on whether you're doing a type 1 or a type 2 energy assessment. So, we're talking, probably 2 to 3 months from start to finish in that process. So it's important to be aware of that, because if you are in the process of installing something and you think you might put a grant application in, if you've already commenced work on the project or you've already installed the equipment, it's not eligible under the program because you actually haven't had the funding approved. So you must wait to commence the install until you actually have the grant approved. Emily's mentioned the key dates. The on-farm energy assessments close on the 15th of July. Now, I would encourage anyone who's interested to lodge an application as soon as you can for that. Just as an idea, in the last 6 weeks of the previous program, 70% of the applications were received. So we had hundreds of applications to get through, and that pushes the timelines out, not only for processing, but it also pushes the timelines out for the energy assessors. So get in early and avoid the rush, because human nature is, if the date says the 15th of July, you'll start completing the application on the 10th. So the grant applications close on the 15th of December. So there is plenty of time there to get the energy assessment done, get your quotes organised and lodge an application. Now, I need to emphasise it's the applications that close on these dates. So as long as you get the application in before those dates, then we will still be processing them. It's not like they have to be approved by that date. So very important, just make sure you get those in. The other thing which I've asked Sarah and Chris to do, don't get too wound up in the process and worrying about it, because Sarah and Chris will provide my direct contact details. If you need to talk through this after this meeting, or you just want to talk to someone in a bit more detail, just pick up the phone, give me a call, and I'm more than happy to talk to you all day. They actually pay me to do it, which is a great job. So I'll help you through the application process. I'll also help you with deciding what grants you may be looking at, talk through which particular application you may need to lodge, and also as we move through the implementation stage, I'm your point of contact there. So please feel free to pick up the phone or drop me an email. If you leave a voicemail, I will get back to you. It may not be immediately, but I always try and get back on the same day. All right, so that's an overview. So basically, if you guys are on this call, if you're on a property in Victoria, you're eligible. So, all right, Chris, Sarah, over to you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Emily. So yeah, as you can see, Peter's details are there. So we will send this out at the end with a follow-up email, so don't feel like you have to race around for a pen. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Mark and Remi. So Mark, if you want to take over and go through what Northmore Gordon has to offer.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, and good morning, everybody. And I think we've got some slides to present, Sarah, is that right? Yep. Thank you. So myself and Remi are energy consultants from a firm called Northmore Gordon. We're specialists in helping farms and large businesses and industrial facilities reduce their energy consumption and carbon footprint. That's all we do. We're a team of about 30 based in Melbourne and Sydney and Singapore. And we've got stocked by a large number of engineers of various sorts, and we have a lot of industrial and background. We are one of many, several companies that are on the panel to provide audit services under this program. Next slide, please. So we're just going to quickly cover these 3 points: what's involved in an assessment, some thoughts about what you guys can do to make the process a bit easy, and we also want to just run through some typical opportunities to reduce energy consumption and energy costs. Next slide, please. So the audit process, so it's really it's a four-step process, and it really centres on the very important personal on-site farm visit and discussion with the farm staff on site. But before we can do that, we would issue a detailed data request. We really need to understand your energy consumption, diesel and electricity and any other fuel that you might be using over the last year or two. And the more we know about exactly where you're using it, how you're using it, and when you're using it, the more useful we can be to you. We'll also need equipment lists and a range of information that we would require to understand your business, which we'll send through in writing. And there'll be a few phone calls, but this is all about preparing us for the site visit. So by the time we arrive at the site, we understand the business, we understand what your needs are and what your particular issues are around energy, and any existing ideas you already have about where you think you'd like to make improvements or what upgrades you think you might want to make. Then we tee up a time with you to visit the site. We probably spend 3 hours or so with you on the farm. Obviously organise a time that's convenient to you. We're quite flexible. And during that time, we dig deeper. We really want to understand the business well and where energy is used and where it might be being wasted. We may even also, in some cases, bring equipment such as thermal cameras, electricity loggers. We might install some additional measurement equipment to gather more detailed data. And by the time we leave that site, we have a much better understanding about the way energy is used, and had detailed discussions with you, and maybe generated a short list about likely opportunities for improvement. We then go away, we take the information that we've learned from that visit and from you, and do some detailed analysis. We'll generate a master list of potential improvement opportunities, and our job is to establish budget prices for the upgrades or purchases, and also estimates on the savings of energy and the payback time. That may require some interaction with some of your equipment vendors to get some more detailed pricing. We then provide that to you in a final report and over the phone discussion to help make decisions around how you're going to prioritise the recommendations. And the outcome of that process includes an electricity tariff review. So we're interested to make sure that they'll give you advice about whether the tariffs you're paying for electricity are appropriate and competitive, and some advice on how to maybe get a better price. And for each of the opportunities we identify, we'll obviously put in writing a description of the opportunity, estimating cost savings and benefits, some implementation suggestions, and enough information to enable you to put together an application to the department for a grant. It's also worth noting that part of our role, I'd like to emphasise that we don't sell equipment. We're consultants only. We have no vested interest in trying to recommend any particular equipment or size of equipment. And I think a good example of that, the importance of that, is around sizing of solar systems. So our interest is in making sure that a solar PV array is sized correctly, not too big, not too small. We're not interested in seeing a system that's too large being installed. So with that, I might hand over to Remi. He's got more hands-on experience than I have in actual assessments, and he can talk to you about the typical opportunities we find on sheep and beef farms. So I'll hand over to you, please, Remi.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, everyone. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to go through 3 typical categories of opportunities that we typically identify for sheep and beef farms. I have no intention to be exhaustive, but it does cover probably 80% of everything we can typically see for this type of farms. The very first one is going to be around irrigation systems. So when we talk about irrigation systems, we first have to acknowledge the fact that pumping systems are designed for specific application, specific flow rate, specific head. The reality is that time change, situation and circumstance change, and sometimes pumping systems are not quite suitable anymore for the application, or technology change. So when we do a site visit, when we do an analysis, our first goal is actually to find out how efficient and how well the current pumping system perform. And there's basically two ways you can address an irrigation system. The first one is there ways you can actually reduce the use of water? And the second is there a way you can improve the performance of your existing system? In terms of reducing the use of water, it's mostly around control and automation of your system by irrigating at night, for instance, in order to reduce the evaporation from the soil. It can be around optimizing the irrigation system itself by having different nozzles, different spacing and height for your pivot irrigator. And can also be around increasing the water retention of the soil, typically through alternative grazing practices. On the pump efficiency side, what we're typically looking for is there any ways that we can minimize back pressure? It is quite often that we see partially closed valve on a discharge side of pumps to increase the static pressure of a system. And the reality is there are ways you can completely and fully open those valves, reduce the friction loss, while still maintaining a high efficiency from your system. The question also is, can we reduce the flow rate of your pump in order to minimize friction losses? Again, irrigators can be an opportunity to optimize the use of the pump upstream. And finally, is there an opportunity for the replacement of the entire pumping system with a technology which is more efficient? So that's energy efficiency, how to achieve the same level of quality and performance, but consuming less energy. You have another side, which is the sourcing of energy. So is your pump powered with a diesel engine or with an electric engine? And for this particular electric engine, is there a way you can reduce the cost of energy? So that's typically where we talk about electrification of diesel systems. So it is quite often that in beef and sheep farms, you have pumping systems which are remote with no immediate electric supply, and they typically run with a diesel generator or a direct driven diesel motor. Diesel motors, as a rule of thumb, have 30% efficiency. An electric motor, as a rule of thumb, has 90% or 80% efficiency. So going to electric can be a significant source of energy savings. Now, we need to highlight the fact that upgrading from diesel powered motors or pump to electric power motor is not a straightforward answer. You need to be very specific and clear whether or not on how often you run those systems and how much energy you can effectively save. And finally, and I think that would be a case study afterward, you can actually consider to have a hybrid system of solar PV electric and diesel generated power for your pumping systems, which can save also a lot of energy, a lot of cost, and improve reliability and control of the pumping system. I could talk a lot more and be more technical, but I will just stay there. And of course, if you have any questions during this presentation, please feel free to enter them into the chat box. So that's for irrigation systems. So irrigation systems tend to be easily 50 to 80% of the energy cost. The next major item is around machinery. Machinery typically refers to all equipment, such as tractors, that are used for tilling, spraying of herbicides and fertilizers, which are typically used on the farm. The question we have here is there a way for you to use less of those machines and or to use them more efficiently? So typically, what we're talking about here is diesel consumption of those engines, of the tractors. The first thing you have to do is due diligence on the maintenance of your equipment, make sure that the tires are correctly pressurized, make sure that the engine is correctly checked, the oil level is correct. That sounds like a very basic opportunities, but they actually do save a lot of energy in the long term. The next stage is there a way for you to use less of those machines? So typically, when you are doing the preparation of the land with the spraying of fertilizer or herbicides, you will typically have tanks attached to the tractor that you will go around the paddocks to spray the liquids. Is there a way for you to have larger tanks, so you have to do less back and forth to the farm to refill the tank? Another one, which is actually quite common right now, is the use of smart sprayers. So typically, if we talk about herbicides, having machines that can detect weed and spray only when required. This kind of machine can drastically reduce the use of fertilizer and, of course, reduce the number of back and forth we have to do between the paddock and the farm for refilling. You have also different practices, such as efficient tilling to reduce the consumption of diesel by the tractor. You can use to have a weight bridge directly at the farm in order to minimize the back and forth to a different facility for the weighting of equipment. And finally, quite similar to the first one I've mentioned, you can have larger grain bins on the tractor in order to minimize the number of back and forth to the farm to refill the grain to be spread on the paddock. And finally, a small opportunity is around the bag inloaders and outloaders when the grain is stored at the farm. So typically that's large opportunities as well. So diesel consumption from equipment can be a significant part of your energy expenditure, and working on new technologies and different practices for the use of those machines can significantly, again, reduce the use of diesel. And now we go to the last part of this presentation, that is solar PV systems. So I will guess that many of you in this call have received requests or interest from installing solar PV systems. So solar PV systems are interesting, depending on your application and depending on the way you can use it. So a typical one, of course, is for all electrical systems that you have in your farm, which include shading, garage, electric system, lighting, and so on. A PV system will typically be an interesting opportunity to have. Of course, the next one that I've mentioned briefly earlier was the use of solar PV systems to power irrigation systems. And there, the payback can usually be extremely good. Now, a few key things to have in mind. The sizing of your solar PV system is extremely important. And you will most likely face situations where you have a conflict of interest in the engineering design of a solar PV system and the financial benefit of it. Under this energy efficiency grant, systems should be designed to minimize export to the grid. The reality is that the feed-in tariff in Victoria is still very generous, and therefore make oversized system relatively financially interesting. So when you are suggested to install solar PV system, it is unfortunately quite often we hear suppliers to sell and to suggest massively oversized solar PV systems. And under the grant, under the program, we will recommend something that will most likely be smaller, just in order to minimize the electricity that you export to the grid. Now, also a thing you want to know, or be aware of at least, is even if you install an oversized system, some distributors have a cap on the maximum solar export you can generate. Therefore, if that is the case, oversizing the PV system might be actually a waste of money and a waste of time. When you want to install a solar PV system, and that is beyond the actual audit itself. So once you have made a decision you want to install a solar PV system, make sure you install a solar PV system that is of good quality. There have hundreds of systems out there, hundreds of brands and companies. But one particular key criteria you can use as a way to judge of the quality of a solar PV system is how long is the warranty. As an example, what you should typically expect is 25 years warranty on the solar panels and 10 years warranty on the inverter. Anything below that, you might question the quality of it. Batteries can be of interest. So far, most of the system we have seen batteries were still quite expensive and not so much relevant. But in some cases, batteries can actually be cheap and therefore relevant, financially speaking, for the implementation in a farm. And of course, with battery system, you can actually with battery system, it can actually be an opportunity for you to improve the supply and reliability of your electricity supply. Many farms live in remote areas, and it is quite often we hear that you have experience of brownouts or even blackouts. Having a solar PV system with battery can definitely reduce your risk associated to electricity supply. I think that's all the items I wanted to cover on the solar PV system. Before I hand over back to Sarah or Chris, Mark, is there anything else you wanted to add on the different opportunities?
No, you've done a good job. Thanks, Remi. We've got a Q&A session coming up, so no doubt there'll be some questions.
All right. Thank you very much. So I will stop at this point.
Thanks, Remi. Thanks, Mark. Peter August, our producer from Gippsland, is able to unmute himself and go through his experience with round one grants. And yeah, maybe Peter, if you could just give us a quick overview of your system and what benefit you've got out of it to date, and yeah, the process, and maybe any tips for other producers that are listening in and to prepare themselves for an application.
Certainly. Okay, so thank you, everybody. Sorry, I had a bit of a technical issue. Now we've got a 40 by 330 watt solar panels, and that's about 13 odd kilowatts of solar. We also have 48 kilowatts of battery storage capacity, and that's excellent in terms of the type of batteries that we've got. The type of batteries that we've got are lithium-ion batteries, and they're also you buy them in stacks of 4. You can get less than 4, but generally the maximum sort of is a stack of 4. And we got 3 stacks of 4 because we're completely off the grid where we are. And from the audit that we had done, it showed that we could save in the 90% plus of diesel expenditure. One thing that I do wish to note for all prospective applicants is to make sure your auditor delineates between business use and domestic use. That's very important. Yeah, that's really what I've got to say on the matter. If anybody has any questions, they're quite welcome to ask. Hello?
Yep, we're here, but that's okay.
I thought I was having another technical issue there.
No, we're still here.
Good.
So I might start, Peter. Like you said, you're completely off the grid, and you've got a solar and battery backup or battery system.
Yeah.
So what's the main things that obviously power in the house, but what are the main things around the farm in that business delineation?
Absolutely. So it powers some of the pumps. It powers the sheds, the fencing. Yeah. So that's mainly what gets powered, and that's very important for us.
Excellent. Okay, thank you for that, Peter. Well, the fact that you made it all the way through the system to actually get the grant means that it wasn't an overly onerous task, and that you found it reasonable to apply and so forth.
Yeah, well, it was, look, I thank Peter Harrison because he was able to guide, because I only found out about it 2 weeks before it closed last year. So we were able to mobilise an order to get the application through within the nick of time. I just advise all prospective applicants to allow a little bit of an increase from the time that you, in price of a potential system, from the time that you get the quote to the time that the grant is approved, because there is a bit of a lag time there, right? And it might have just been a COVID-related increase. I don't know. There's delays from imports, etc. That might not be the case now, but I certainly found that to be an issue.
Yep. Fair enough. Excellent. Well, thank you for that, Peter. And with 15 minutes to go, I think we'll open it up to questions. Sarah, did we get any questions through the process, through any of the speakers?
Yes, we do have a few questions come through. So our first question, which will be for Peter or Emily, just scrolling through them. Here it is. So we've had a question saying that we're already off the grid. Would the energy assessment include this, or is the grant only to reduce costs?
It's part of the assessment process is that the assessors will actually look at how you're set up at the moment, and I've seen a number of assessments that have commented that say they've got a 50 kilowatt system on there. They'll actually review that, make sure it's the optimum system for you. We've had some where we've had recommendations to put on more solar panels or basically increase the capacity of it. Also, looking at what's connected, and if you're a dairy farmer and you're still trying to heat your water at night, then there's no point having solar panels, for instance. So making sure things are connected up where they should be. But really everything comes down to what's in the energy assessment report, because we don't know what we don't know. And what I will say is that it's very, very unusual for an energy assessor to go on farm and not find opportunities.
Thank you, Peter. While we've got Peter talking, I've got a question from Mark. This might be interesting to a few people. How many quotes are required to support a grant application?
Yeah, there's only one quote required. In the previous round, we asked for 2 quotes for the Tier 1 grants, but we've streamlined that a bit at the moment. What we encourage, if possible, and if you're comfortable, if you've got a local supplier, we are more than happy for you to go with your trusted local supplier. We don't base the quotes or the eligibility of the quote on who's the cheapest price. We want you to find the best value for money. One of the questions in the application is about value for money and why have you gone with that quote, and it's because it's your local supplier. They do all the work on our farm. We trust them, they understand our systems. So there is a recommendation in the energy assessment reports about the expected costs. So but market forces suggest that that's going to vary. If you're in a remote part of the state, then it's going to cost you more to have things installed. So, but yeah, we only look for one. Sometimes we encourage you to seek a second opinion. We do some monitoring, particularly with solar. We've got a pretty good understanding of what the range of cents per kilowatts installed is. And if we think it's a bit over the top, then we do encourage you to get a second opinion.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Peter. We've had another question come through asking, how long has this grant been open for?
Well, the program, this is the second program. The first program started in 2018 and closed in June of last year. This program opened for applications on the 1st of March. And as I've said before, it's a short and sharp program. We'll be closed to applications in December. The first program had $30 million. There's an additional $30 million in this program. So the total funding available over the life of both programs is $60 million. And Emily mentioned before, we oversubscribed the first program, significantly oversubscribed it. So hence my encouragement to get in early.
And applications for on-farm energy assessments close on the 15th of July, which is not too far away.
Just to clarify that point, Emily, I think you said earlier this morning that the applications close, then the assessments don't have to be done by then. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. So the application for the on-farm energy assessment closes on the 15th of July, but we've got our grant applications open till the 15th of December. So there's time for you to have your on-farm energy assessment completed and then be able to apply for a grant.
Yeah. And I think just on the on-farm energy assessments, that is the first part of the process, and you can't go to grant unless you've got an energy assessment available. Now, if nothing else, I would encourage people to apply and have an on-farm energy assessment done. Now, it may come in and you may decide not to go ahead with anything. That's fine, but at least you've got a roadmap, if you like, of potential energy savings on your property that you may decide to implement over time. The on-farm energy assessments are at no cost to the farmer. So, you know, you're not going to be out of pocket for it. You may lose a bit of time on it, but it's definitely a worthwhile process.
Chris, I think it's worth just if I can just chime in and make the point that one of the benefits of having an assessment is not just about energy and operating costs. It's also about getting a clearer picture about the farm's carbon footprint. So one of the part of the data that's provided in our assessment is a carbon profile associated with all that energy use. And for those farms that are interested in pursuing maybe a journey of reducing their overall carbon footprint, that can be very useful. And as you say, even if no changes take place immediately, it sets a bit of a benchmark starting point. But I just stress that carbon footprint is around the energy consumption. Obviously, the carbon emissions associated with use of fertilizer and land management and so on is a separate and also from animals is a separate category of emissions. But the energy footprint component is part of the scope of the assessment.
Thank you, Mark.
Just with regards to the energy footprint, the system that I have actually has an app that on my phone, and it actually tells you how many kilos of carbon emission have been avoided. But currently, since I've had my system installed, I've saved 931 kilos of carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere. So that's, at least you can see it ongoing.
That's pretty awesome there, Peter. Oh, Peter Harrison, were you about to jump in and say something?
Yeah, while people are thinking or perhaps wanting to get in the ute and check their stock, a couple of points I'd just make, just in regard to solar, and I think Remi alluded to it. You will, if you do go down the path of solar, you will be encouraged by the solar installer to put in larger systems. We have an allowance of 30% above the recommended size before we start looking at any amendments or pro rata adjustments to the grant funding, because the grant funding is provided on a dollar for dollar basis up to the caps of 50,000 for tier 1 and 250,000 for tier 2. So if it's a 50 kilowatt recommendation and they come at you with 60, it'll still go through okay, because it's within that 30% threshold that we allow for it. And the other thing is, I just want to, this is not a knockout type of grant. It's what we do is we work very closely with the farmers to try and get a project up and over the line. So if you don't tick every box, it's not like you get an email saying bad luck, you missed out. We decline very few applications through the first part of the program, and that's the approach we're taking, is we actually want to help you guys get some cost relief and also some electricity or gas or diesel reduction on farm. So it helps you, it helps the environment, it helps your viability. So we will work with you until we can get a result if we can.
And I can vouch for that, folks, all the prospective applicants listening. I was helped throughout the whole process, and for that I'm very grateful. Peter and his team were very, very helpful in helping me through the process, and so we got it over the line, and that was great. I mean, it was over $40,000 of grant that I got. So that's a significant sum for me, and as I said, for that I'm very grateful.
Thank you, Peter and Peter. And yeah, I've had similar feedback from other farmers as well, that Peter has been a fantastic help to them as well. I have had another question come through here. Would dairy farmers be eligible for this grant? And also, if they have an existing solar system that's not performing as expected, would they be eligible to upgrade their solar system?
Yes to both questions. If you are a farmer in Victoria, it doesn't matter what area of farming, dairy, horticulture, broadacre farming, grazing, whatever, as long as you're a farmer in Victoria, you are eligible to apply. And we've seen a number where we've actually had one where the solar system just wasn't working at all, and we ended up funding the replacement of that system to a better one that actually provided some really great savings. So the answer is yes.
Thank you.
One quick point I'd like to make, if I can, Chris, and that is for those interested in reviewing the performance of any existing pumps, whether they're water transfer pumps or pump supplying irrigators. It's actually very helpful in the process of analysing that pump to have a pressure gauge in line installed. So that's something to consider. If you are getting an assessment done and you are pumping water, and you have not got pressure gauges on the suction side or the supply side of the pump, then that's something that's relatively easy to do and provides a lot more insight into what duty that pump's performing, how it's operating compared to its design spec.